They told me I would never fly first class. Today, I own the plane. The fluorescent lights of JFK Terminal 3 hummed above me like a swarm of mechanical bees, indifferent to the drama about to unfold. I stood there with my worn backpack slung over one shoulder, the zipper held together with a safety pin I had scavenged from my apartment bathroom. Around me, travelers rushed past in their expensive athleisure and designer luggage, oblivious to the girl in the faded jeans and thrift store coat who was about to have her world shattered once again. That is when I saw them. Richard Vance, my father, emerged from the crowd like a ship cutting through water. His charcoal gray suit probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. Beside him, draped in a cream cashmere coat, was Tiffany, his wife of 5 years, young enough to be his daughter. And trailing behind them, rolling not 1 but 3 Louis Vuitton suitcases, was Skylar, Tiffany's daughter from a previous marriage, the golden child who could do no wrong. I should have looked away. I should have pretended I did not see them. But something kept me rooted to that spot, watching as my father threw his head back and laughed at something Tiffany whispered in his ear. The sound of his laughter used to be my favorite thing in the world. Now it felt like broken glass in my chest. Skylar spotted me first. Her perfectly manicured hand flew to her mouth in mock surprise, drawing Richard's attention. I watched his expression shift from pleasant contentment to something darker, something that looked almost like disgust. He said something to Tiffany, who turned to look at me with those cold blue eyes that had never held an ounce of warmth. They approached me slowly, deliberately, like predators circling wounded prey. The crowd seemed to part for them, as if money and confidence created their own gravitational field. "Mia," Richard said, using the childhood nickname he knew I hated. "What are you doing here?" I straightened my spine, lifting my chin. "I'm flying to New York, same as you apparently." Skylar laughed, that high-pitched, tinkling sound she had perfected for maximum condescension. "Oh my God, Mia, this is hilarious. You? On a plane? Do you even have enough money for an economy ticket?" "It's her first time at an airport, Laya," Richard said, using Skylar's nickname with the same affection he had once reserved for me. "Look at her, she doesn't even know where to go." Tiffany leaned in, her perfume overwhelming in its expensiveness. "Sweetheart, the cattle hold is that way." She pointed with one red lacquered nail toward the economy check-in counters. "That's where people like you fly, if you fly at all." "We're flying first class to the city," Skylar announced, waving her boarding pass like a trophy. "Daddy got us the best seats. We're going to that tech conference, you know, the one everyone who's anyone will be at." "Oh, but you wouldn't know about that, would you?" "Too busy dreaming about being an entrepreneur." She drew out the last word mockingly. Richard stepped closer, and I could smell the expensive cologne that used to mean safety to me when I was small. Now it just smelled like betrayal. "Don't embarrass us, Mia," he said quietly, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "We're the Vance family. We have a reputation to maintain." Something cold and hard crystallized in my chest. "Embarrass you?" I repeated, my voice eerily calm. "Do we even still have a family to embarrass?" His jaw tightened, and for a moment I saw a flicker of something that might have been guilt. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by his usual mask of superiority. Tiffany said, linking her arm through his. "We don't want to be late for our flight. Let's go to the first-class lounge." "Yes," Skylar added with a smirk. "Enjoy the cargo hold, Mia. Try not to think about us too much while we're sipping champagne up front." They walked away, their laughter echoing across the terminal. I watched them disappear toward the priority security line, watched Skylar throw one last mocking glance over her shoulder. My hands were shaking, and I realized I had been clenching them so hard that my nails had left crescents in my palms. This was not the first time. This was not even the worst time. But something about standing there in that airport, watching my father choose them over me yet again, watching him laugh at my expense, lit a fire inside me that I had been trying to suppress for 2 long years. I closed my eyes and let myself remember. 2 years ago, I had been the lead architect on the biggest project Vance Corp had ever undertaken. The Phoenix Tower, a revolutionary mixed-use development that would redefine the Manhattan skyline. I had poured everything into it, 18-hour days, weekends, holidays. I had sacrificed friendships, relationships, my health, all for that project, all to make Richard proud, all to prove that I was worthy of being his daughter. I remembered the day I presented the final designs to the board. Richard had sat at the head of the table, nodding as I walked through every detail, every innovation, every carefully calculated risk. When I finished, he had stood and applauded. For one shining moment, I thought I had finally done it. I had finally earned his respect. That illusion lasted exactly 3 days. Richard called an emergency board meeting. I arrived early, excited to hear which construction firm we would be partnering with. Instead, I walked into a room where Skylar sat in my usual seat. A portfolio of designs spread in front of her. My designs. With her name on them. "Aurora," Richard had said, and even the use of my real name could not soften the blow of what came next. "We've decided to give the Phoenix Tower project to Skylar." She brings a fresh perspective, a certain vision that we think will resonate better with our target market. I had stared at him, unable to process what I was hearing. What? That's my project. I've been working on it for 2 years. Every single detail in those designs is mine. Skylar had leaned back in her chair, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. Daddy thinks I have a better aesthetic sense. After all, I did graduate from the Art Institute. You graduated with a degree in photography, I had snapped. You don't know the first thing about architecture, about engineering, about any of this. But she has something you don't, Tiffany had interjected smoothly. Charisma, people skills. You're very good at the technical work, Mia, but let's be honest, you're not a people person. You're too intense, too emotional. She's right, Richard had agreed, and those 2 words from him hurt more than anything Tiffany could say. Skylar has what it takes to lead. You're brilliant, Aurora, but you lack the finesse needed for a project of this magnitude. Consider this a learning opportunity. Learn to let go. Learn to support the team. I had looked around that boardroom, searching for an ally, for anyone who would speak up for me, but they all avoided my eyes. They all knew what this really was. This was Richard choosing his new family over his daughter. This was him erasing me to make room for them. You can't do this, I had said, hating how my voice shook. This is my life's work. This project was supposed to launch my career. Your career? Richard had laughed, actually laughed. Sweetheart, you work for me. Everything you create belongs to Vance Corp. That's how this works. Now, are you going to support Skylar, or are we going to have a problem? I had looked at my father, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. The man who had taught me to draw blueprints when I was 8 years old. The man who had told me I could be anything I wanted to be. That man was gone, replaced by this cold, calculating businessman who saw me as nothing more than a resource to be used and discarded. No, I had said quietly. We don't have a problem, because I quit. The silence in that room had been deafening. Richard's face had turned red, then purple. You're throwing a tantrum because you didn't get your way? This is exactly why you're not ready for leadership, Aurora. You're too immature. No, I had corrected him, gathering my materials with shaking hands. I'm leaving because I finally understand who you really are, and I refuse to work for a man who values me so little. I had walked out of that conference room, out of Vance Corp, and out of Richard's life. I took nothing but my laptop and the knowledge in my head. No severance package, no references. Just the clothes on my back and a determination burning so hot it could have melted steel. The next 6 months were the darkest of my life. I moved into a tiny apartment in the Lower East Side, a 5th-floor walk-up with a bathroom the size of a closet and a kitchen that consisted of a hot plate and a mini-fridge. My neighbors included a drummer who practiced at 3 in the morning and a couple who screamed at each other in Russian every night. I worked 3 jobs just to make rent. Mornings, I served coffee at a trendy cafe in Soho, smiling at customers who complained about their lattes while wearing watches that cost more than my yearly salary. Afternoons, I did freelance CAD work for small firms, the kind of boring, repetitive projects that paid $50 for 8 hours of work. Nights, I bartended at a dive bar in the East Village, where I learned to tune out the sound of drunken confessions and broken hearts. But every spare moment, every minute I was not working, I was building. I had an idea, something that had been germinating in my mind for years. A logistics platform powered by AI, designed to revolutionize how goods moved through supply chains. It was ambitious. It was probably impossible, but it was mine. I pitched my idea to everyone who would listen. I attended every startup event, every networking mixer, every tech talk I could find. I wore the same interview outfit, a black blazer from H&M and pants I had bought at a thrift store, to every single meeting. I memorized my pitch until I could deliver it in my sleep, and I failed. Over and over and over again. The technology doesn't exist yet, one venture capitalist told me, barely looking up from his phone. You don't have enough experience, another said, her eyes dismissive. Come back when you have traction, said a third, and I wanted to scream at him that I needed funding to get traction, that this was a chicken and egg problem with no solution. I was rejected 47 times. I kept count, each rejection a notch on my bedpost, a reminder of how far I still had to climb. I lived on instant ramen and stale bagels from the cafe. I stopped buying new clothes. I walked everywhere to save subway fare. My friends from my old life stopped calling. No one wants to be around someone who reminds them that success is not guaranteed, that you can fall from grace and keep falling. There were nights I lay awake on my air mattress, listening to the sounds of the city through my thin walls, wondering if Richard had been right. Maybe I was not cut out for this. Maybe I should have stayed, should have swallowed my pride, should have accepted my place in his hierarchy. But then I would remember that boardroom. I would remember Skylar sitting in my chair, claiming my work as her own. I would remember Richard's eyes, empty of any love or recognition when he looked at me. And I would get up the next morning and start again. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday. I had been working a double shift at the bar when a customer started complaining about a shipment of merchandise that had been delayed. He was furious, ranting about how logistics companies were all incompetent, how they could not handle complex routes, how they needed better technology. I had listened to him for 20 minutes, then calmly explained how my platform would solve his exact problem. I grabbed a napkin and sketched out the algorithm, showing him how machine learning could predict delays, reroute shipments in real time, and optimize costs. He had stared at me for a long moment, then asked if I had a business card. I did not, but I gave him my email. His name was Marcus Thorne. He was retired military, someone who had spent 30 years in logistics and supply chain management for the Department of Defense. He had money, connections, and most importantly, he believed in me. We met the next day at a coffee shop in Midtown. I brought my laptop with its cracked screen and showed him everything I had built. The prototype was rough, held together with duct tape and prayer, but it worked. Marcus asked me questions for 3 hours straight, probing every aspect of the business model, the technology, the market opportunity. At the end of it, he had leaned back in his chair and said, "I'll fund you, but I have conditions. You build this properly. No shortcuts, no compromises. We do this right, or we don't do it at all." That was 18 months ago. Marcus became my mentor, my co-founder, and the closest thing I had to family. He introduced me to engineers, to other investors, to potential clients. He taught me how to negotiate, how to pitch, how to think like a CEO instead of an architect. We called the company Monrovia Systems, named after the street where my mother grew up before she died. It was my way of honoring her memory, the only parent who had ever truly believed in me. The first year was brutal. We worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week. There were moments when the code would not compile, when clients would cancel at the last minute, when I was certain we were going to fail. But Marcus never wavered. He had seen enough in his career to know that success was not about avoiding failure. It was about getting back up every single time you fell. Our first major client was a mid-sized shipping company on the West Coast. They were skeptical, but desperate. Their logistics were a mess, and they were hemorrhaging money. We implemented our platform in 3 months, and their costs dropped by 30%. Word spread. Within 6 months, we had 12 clients. Within a year, we had 40. Major corporations started calling. We hired engineers, salespeople, customer support. I moved out of my apartment in the Lower East Side into a modest 1-bedroom in Brooklyn. Nothing fancy, but it had a working kitchen and neighbors who did not scream in foreign languages. The money started coming in. Not millions, not yet, but enough that I could stop bartending, could stop taking freelance jobs, could focus entirely on building Monrovia. I poured every dollar back into the company, hiring the best people, investing in the best technology, building something that could not be ignored. And through it all, I thought about Richard, about Skylar, about that boardroom where they had tried to erase me. Every time I wanted to quit, every time I was exhausted or scared or doubting myself, I would picture their faces when they realized what I had built. It kept me going through the darkest nights. 18 months after Marcus first invested, we had grown Monrovia Systems into a company worth $50 million. We had offices in 3 cities. We had 200 employees. We were profitable, growing, and about to sign our biggest client yet, a Fortune 500 company that would put us on the map in a way nothing else could. That was when I heard about the Global Tech Summit. It was the biggest technology conference of the year, held in Manhattan, where the most powerful people in tech gathered to network, show off, and make deals. Vance Corp had always been one of the main sponsors. Richard loved the prestige of it, loved walking around like he owned the place. This year, I decided to crash his party. It took 2 months of negotiation, but we became the platinum sponsor of the summit. It cost us a substantial amount of money we probably should have used for expansion, but I did not care. This was not about business. This was about sending a message. Which brought me back to this moment, standing in JFK Terminal 3, watching my father and his replacement family disappear toward their first-class paradise, still believing I was the same broken girl they had discarded 2 years ago. Miss Vance? I turned to see a man in a crisp military uniform approaching me. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair and the kind of bearing that spoke of decades of discipline. Behind him, I could see other uniformed personnel, all moving with purpose. "Yes?" I said, my heart suddenly pounding. "Your aircraft is ready for departure, ma'am. We're awaiting your clearance to taxi." I felt a smile spread across my face, slow and dangerous. "My aircraft?" "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Thorne had it brought up from D.C. this morning. He said you might need it for the trip to New York." He gestured toward the windows, where I could see a sleek black jet sitting on the tarmac, its engines already humming. The Monrovia Systems logo gleamed silver against the dark fuselage. I followed him through a private security channel, bypassing the chaos of the regular terminal. We walked through corridors that smelled like new carpet and money, past lounges where CEOs and celebrities waited for their flights in leather chairs and marble bathrooms. As we stepped onto the tarmac, I saw them. Richard, Tiffany, and Skylar were boarding their commercial first-class flight, climbing the stairs to the plane with their designer luggage. Skylar looked bored, scrolling through her phone. Richard was laughing at something Tiffany said. And then they saw me. I will never forget the look on their faces. Richard froze mid-step, his expression shifting from confidence to confusion to something that might have been fear. Skylar's mouth fell open, her phone almost slipping from her hand. Tiffany's eyes narrowed, trying to figure out what she was seeing. I walked past them toward my jet, my worn backpack now seeming ironic rather than pathetic. The uniformed officer opened the aircraft door, and I paused at the top of the stairs, turning back to look at my father. Our eyes met across the tarmac. I could see him trying to process what was happening, trying to reconcile the daughter he had dismissed with the woman standing in front of a private jet. I did not wave. I did not smile. I just looked at him, letting him see in my eyes everything I had become despite him, not because of him. Then I stepped into my plane and let the door close behind me. The interior was beautiful, all cream leather and polished wood. Marcus was already seated, a glass of whiskey in his hand and a satisfied smirk on his face. "I saw their faces," he said. "That was better than I imagined." I sank into the seat across from him, suddenly exhausted. This was petty of me, wasn't it? Petty? Marcus shook his head. "Aurora, you've earned the right to a little pettiness. Besides, this is just the opening act. Wait until they see you at the summit." He was right. This was just the beginning, because I had not just bought a sponsorship at the Global Tech Summit. I had bought the keynote speech slot. The one that Richard had paid for every year since the summit started. The one he used to preach about innovation while running his company on the same tired principles of hierarchy and favoritism. This year, that slot was mine. The flight to New York was smooth. We landed at Teterboro, the private airport in New Jersey, and a car whisked us into Manhattan. The summit was being held at the Javits Center, that massive glass and steel convention center on the west side. Already, I could see banners going up, advertising the event. My face was on one of them. Marcus had arranged for me to stay at the plaza. It was ostentatious, probably unnecessary, but he insisted. "You need to look the part," he said. "Confidence is half the battle." I spent the next 2 days in preparation. There were interviews with tech journalists, meetings with potential investors, rehearsals for my keynote. I barely slept, running on adrenaline, and the knowledge that in 48 hours, I would be standing on that stage in front of everyone who had ever doubted me. The morning of the summit, I woke up before dawn. I stood at the window of my hotel room, looking out over Central Park, and thought about all the times I had walked through that park dreaming of a different life. Now I was living it. I dressed carefully. Navy blue dress, simple but elegant, hair pulled back, minimal jewelry. I wanted to look professional, powerful, not like I was trying too hard. Marcus met me in the lobby, and we drove to the Javits Center together. The place was chaos. Thousands of people milling about, badges hanging from lanyards, everyone networking, pitching, trying to be seen. I spotted several journalists I recognized, tech CEOs whose companies were worth billions, venture capitalists who could make or break a startup with one conversation. And somewhere in this crowd were Richard, Tiffany, and Skylar. I did not have to wait long to see them. They were holding court near the main exhibition hall, Richard in his element, shaking hands and schmoozing. Skylar was dressed in some ridiculous outfit that probably cost more than my first month's rent in the Lower East Side, all ruffles and unnecessary accessories. Tiffany stood beside Richard like an ornament, smiling her practiced smile. They had not seen me yet. I could have walked past, could have avoided them until my keynote, but I wanted them to know I was here. I wanted them to have time to stew, to wonder, to worry about what I might say. I walked straight toward them. Richard saw me first. His hand froze mid-shake, his eyes going wide. For a moment, I saw fear flicker across his face, quickly replaced by a forced smile. "Aurora," he said, loudly enough that several people nearby turned to look. "What a surprise. I didn't know you'd be attending." "Didn't you?" I kept my voice pleasant, professional. "I would have thought you'd notice that Monrovia Systems is the platinum sponsor this year. My company's logo is literally everywhere." The color drained from his face. Around us, people were starting to pay attention. In the tech world, drama was currency, and this had all the hallmarks of something juicy. Skylar recovered first, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Monrovia Systems? Is that your little startup, Mia? That's so cute that they let you sponsor an event like this. Did they have a discount for small companies?" I turned to look at her, really look at her. 2 years ago, her words would have stung. Now they just sounded desperate. "No discount," I said calmly. "We paid full price, $50,000 for platinum sponsorship, plus another $100,000 for the keynote slot, the one your father used to have." Richard's face went from white to red. "You bought the keynote slot? That's been my slot for 5 years." "Had been your slot," I corrected. "But the conference organizers explained that sponsorships are first come, first served, and we got there first. I'm sorry, did you want it? You should have moved faster." Tiffany stepped forward, her eyes like ice. This is pathetic, Mia. You're so desperate for Richard's attention that you're spending your company's money just to be in the same room as him. It's sad. I smiled at her. You're right, Tiffany, it is sad. But not for the reasons you think. I glanced at my watch. I have a meeting with the CEO of Dataflow. You know, that company you tried to sign last year, Richard? They're about to become our client. Enjoy the conference. I walked away before he could respond, feeling their eyes burning into my back. Let them wonder. Let them worry. Tonight, they would understand exactly what they had lost when they threw me away. The day passed in a blur of meetings and conversations. I spoke with journalists about Monrovia's growth. I networked with other CEOs. I met with potential investors who wanted to put money into our next round of funding. Everywhere I went, people wanted to talk to me, wanted to hear about how I had built a $50 million company in less than 2 years. And through it all, I could feel Richard watching me. Every time I turned around, he was there, hovering at the edge of conversations, trying to figure out what I had become. The keynote was scheduled for 7 p.m. By 6:30, the main auditorium was packed, 3,000 seats, all filled. I stood backstage, watching the crowd file in through a gap in the curtain. There were people I recognized from magazines, from news articles, from the companies that had rejected my pitches 2 years ago. And there, in the third row, sat Richard, Tiffany, and Skylar. They had prime seats, probably thinking they would be watching Richard give his usual self-aggrandizing speech. Instead, they were about to watch me. Marcus found me backstage. You ready for this? I've been ready for 2 years, I said. The lights dimmed. The conference organizer, a woman named Patricia, who I had gotten to know over the past months, stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice booming through the speakers. It is my great pleasure to introduce tonight's keynote speaker. 2 years ago, she left a comfortable position to chase a dream. 18 months ago, she was serving coffee to make rent while building her company at night. Today, she runs Monrovia Systems, one of the fastest-growing logistics platforms in the country, with clients across 3 continents and a valuation of $50 million. Please welcome Aurora Vance. The applause was thunderous. I walked onto that stage, and for a moment, the lights were so bright I could barely see the audience. But then my eyes adjusted, and I found them. Richard, Tiffany, and Skylar, sitting there with expressions of shock and disbelief. I smiled. Thank you, Patricia, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. And thank you all for being here tonight. I want to tell you a story. It's not a comfortable story. It's not the kind of story we usually hear at conferences like this, where everything is polished and perfect and everyone pretends they never struggled. But it's my story, and I think it's important. I clicked to the first slide, a photo of me from 2 years ago, taken at a Vance Corp event. I looked young, eager, desperate to please. 2 years ago, I was a lead architect at a company called Vance Corp. I had spent 2 years developing what I thought would be the project of a lifetime. I worked 18-hour days. I sacrificed relationships, health, sleep, everything, all to make that project perfect. And then, 3 days after presenting it to the board, I was told that someone else would be taking over. Someone with no experience, no knowledge of the work, but someone who was family. I paused, letting that sink in. The room was silent. I was told I didn't have leadership potential, that I was too emotional, too intense, that I needed to learn to let go, to support the team. I clicked to the next slide, an image of a tiny apartment in the Lower East Side. So I let go. I quit. And I moved into this apartment, a 5th-floor walk-up that cost me $800 a month. I worked 3 jobs to pay rent while building Monrovia Systems at night. Another slide, a photo of a rejection email from a venture capitalist. I was rejected 47 times. 47 people told me my idea wouldn't work, that I didn't have enough experience, that I should come back when I had traction. I lived on instant ramen. I walked everywhere to save money. I wore the same outfit to every pitch meeting because I couldn't afford new clothes. I could see people in the audience leaning forward, completely engaged. And I could see Richard, his face growing paler with each word. And you know what kept me going? It wasn't the money. It wasn't even the dream of success. It was rage. I let the word hang in the air. I was so angry at being dismissed, at being told I wasn't good enough, at watching someone take credit for my work, and I channeled that rage into building something they couldn't take away from me. Something that was mine. Next slide. The Monrovia Systems logo. 18 months ago, I met a man named Marcus Thorne who believed in me when no one else did. Together, we built Monrovia Systems. We now have 200 employees. We operate in 12 countries. Last quarter, we did $30 million in revenue, and we're just getting started. The applause was spontaneous, genuine. I waited for it to die down before continuing. But I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand something important. Success is not about being the most talented or the most connected or the most privileged. Success is about refusing to let other people define your worth. It's about taking the pain of rejection and using it as fuel. It's about proving, not to them, but to yourself, that you are capable of extraordinary things. I clicked to a photo of the airport, the moment from just 2 days ago. 2 days ago, I was standing in JFK Terminal 3. Someone told me I would never fly first class. They laughed at me. They said I belonged in the cargo hold. I smiled. They were right. I don't belong in first class. I belong on my own plane. The room erupted. People were standing, applauding, and I could see Richard sinking lower in his seat, trying to disappear. Skylar's face was bright red. Tiffany looked like she might be sick. There are people in this room right now who dismissed me, I continued once the applause died down. Who told me I didn't have what it takes? Who said I was too emotional, too inexperienced, too much of a dreamer? And you know what? I'm grateful to them, because they taught me the most valuable lesson I've ever learned. Your value is not determined by whether someone else sees it. Your value is inherent. And when you truly believe that, when you truly understand that you don't need anyone's permission to be extraordinary, that's when you become unstoppable. I clicked through several more slides, talking about Monrovia's technology, our growth strategy, our vision for the future. But the real message had been delivered. This was not just a keynote about a successful startup. This was a message to everyone who had ever been told they were not enough. When I finished, the standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. People were taking photos, tweeting, posting on social media. I could see journalists already typing on their phones, crafting stories about the woman who had built a $50 million company to prove her father wrong. I walked off the stage and straight into a crowd of people wanting to talk to me, to congratulate me, to get my card. Marcus appeared at my elbow, beaming. "You destroyed them," he said quietly. "Absolutely destroyed them." I was in the middle of talking to a journalist from TechCrunch when I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to see Richard standing there, trying to smile, trying to look like this was all some big misunderstanding. "Aurora," he said, his voice strained. "That was quite a speech. You've done well for yourself. I'm proud of you." The audacity of those words. After everything, after all the times he had told me I was not good enough, he had the nerve to say he was proud. "Are you?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Are you proud, Richard, or are you embarrassed?" "Don't call me Richard. I'm your father." "No," I said, loud enough that people nearby stopped their conversations to listen. "You lost the right to call yourself my father when you gave my life's work to someone else. When you chose them over me. When you laughed at me in that airport and told me I belonged in the cargo hold." His face went pale. "You heard that?" "I heard everything. I always hear everything." I stepped closer to him. "You taught me to draw blueprints when I was 8 years old. You told me I could build anything I wanted. And then, the moment I actually tried to build something, you took it away from me and gave it to her." I gestured toward where Skylar was standing, looking like she wanted the floor to swallow her. "Aurora, please," Richard said, and his voice actually shook. "We can talk about this. Come back to Vance Corp. We can merge our companies. Think about what we could build together." I laughed. I actually laughed. "You want to merge our companies? Richard, Monrovia is worth $50 million. How much is Vance Corp worth?" He did not answer, and I could see the truth in his silence. Vance Corp was struggling. The Phoenix Tower project had gone over budget and behind schedule. Skylar's vision had turned into a financial nightmare. He needed me. $20 million, I said, because I had done my research. "Vance Corp is worth $20 million, and you're drowning in debt. You need me." And the answer is no. Tiffany appeared next to Richard, her face twisted with anger. "You're being petty," she spat. "You're punishing Richard because you're jealous of Skylar." "Jealous?" I repeated, and the word tasted bitter. "Tiffany, I'm not jealous. I'm successful. There's a difference." Skylar finally found her voice. "This is all because I got one project? One? You built an entire company out of spite? That's pathetic, Mia." I turned to look at her. This girl who had everything handed to her, who had never had to fight for anything, who had taken my work and claimed it as her own. "You're right," I said. "I did build this company out of spite, out of rage, out of a burning desire to prove that I was worth more than you ever gave me credit for. And you know what? It worked. I'm standing here, with investors begging to give me money, with clients lining up, with a company that's changing the world. And where are you? Still living off my father's money, still taking credit for other people's work, still thinking that being pretty and connected is enough." The crowd around us had grown. People were recording on their phones. This was going to be all over social media within the hour. "The Phoenix Tower is failing," I continued, because I could not stop now, because 2 years of anger was finally pouring out. "It's over budget, behind schedule, and the design is a mess. You took my work and you ruined it. Everything you touch turns to garbage because you have never had to actually work for anything." "That's enough," Richard said, his voice hard. "You've made your point, Aurora. You're successful. Congratulations. But don't forget who gave you your start. Everything you know about business, you learned from me." I looked at my father, really looked at him, and saw a man who had never understood me, who had never valued me for anything other than what I could do for him. "You're right," I said softly. "You did teach me something valuable. You taught me exactly what kind of person I never want to be. You taught me that family means nothing when it's built on conditions. You taught me that love has to be earned, and once you lose it, you never get it back." I turned away from them, facing the crowd that had gathered. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to make an announcement. Monrovia Systems will be launching a new initiative tonight. We're creating a fund for entrepreneurs who have been overlooked, dismissed, or pushed aside by people who should have believed in them. $50 million, available in grants and low-interest loans for anyone with a dream and a plan, because no one should have to prove their worth to people who can't see it." The applause was deafening. I looked back at Richard one last time. "That's what you could have had if you had believed in me. Instead, you have debt and a failing project and a daughter who will never speak to you again." I walked away, leaving them standing there in the crowd, and it felt like flying. The rest of the evening was a blur. Journalists wanted interviews. Investors wanted meetings. Other CEOs wanted to network. I was pulled in a dozen directions, shaking hands, taking photos, making promises. Through it all, I could feel Richard's eyes on me, watching, calculating, trying to figure out if there was any way to salvage this. There was not. Around 10 p.m., Marcus finally rescued me from the crowd. "We need to go," he said. "The car's waiting." We slipped out a side entrance and into the waiting SUV. As we pulled away from the Javits Center, I looked back at the building, lit up against the night sky, the Monrovia Systems logo projected onto the side. "You did it," Marcus said quietly. "You really did it." "No," I corrected him. "We did it. None of this happens without you." He smiled. "But you're the one who had the courage to walk away. That's the hardest part, knowing when to cut the toxic people out of your life, even when they're family." I thought about that. About the years I had spent trying to earn Richard's approval, trying to be good enough, trying to make him see me. All that time wasted on someone who was never going to change. "Do you think I was too harsh?" I asked. Marcus considered this. "No, I think you were honest, and sometimes honesty is harsh, but he needed to hear it. They all did." We drove through Manhattan, past the glittering skyscrapers and the crowded streets, and I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Peace. Not happiness, not yet, but peace. The kind that comes from knowing you've fought the battle and won. My phone buzzed. Text messages were pouring in. Congratulations from clients, from investors, from people I had not heard from in years. And in the middle of them, one message from Richard. "We need to talk, please." I stared at those 4 words for a long moment. 2 years ago, I would have jumped at the chance. I would have seen it as an opening, a possibility for reconciliation. Now, I just felt tired. I deleted the message without responding. "Where to?" the driver asked as we approached the plaza. I looked at Marcus. "Where should we celebrate?" He grinned. "I know a place." We ended up at a small bar in the West Village, the kind of place where no one cared who you were or what you did. We sat in a corner booth and ordered whiskey, and Marcus told me stories about his years in the military, about all the times he had seen people overcome impossible odds. "You remind me of the best soldiers I ever served with," he said. "The ones who refuse to quit, no matter what. That's not something you can teach. You either have it or you don't." "I almost quit so many times," I admitted. "There were nights I was so tired, so broke, so convinced I was going to fail. I would lie awake and think about calling Richard, about apologizing, about asking for my job back." "But you didn't." "No, because every time I thought about it, I would remember his face when he gave Skylar my project. I would remember how he looked at me, like I was nothing, and that was worse than being broke. That was worse than failing." Marcus raised his glass. "To remembering the pain, and to using it to become stronger." We clinked glasses, and I felt tears prick my eyes. Not sad tears, grateful tears. For this man who had believed in me when no one else did. For the life I had built from nothing. For the strength I had found in myself that I did not know existed. We left the bar around midnight. The streets were still busy, full of people living their lives, chasing their dreams or running from their fears. I walked slowly back to the hotel, wanting to savor this moment, wanting to remember exactly how this felt. When I got to my room, I stood at the window again, looking out over the city. Somewhere out there, Richard was probably awake too, probably replaying the evening, probably trying to figure out what went wrong. But that was not my problem anymore. He was not my problem anymore. I pulled out my laptop and opened my email. There were hundreds of messages, but one caught my eye. It was from the CEO of the company that had rejected my very first pitch 2 years ago. The subject line read, "We were wrong." I smiled and started typing my response. The next morning, I woke up early and went for a run in Central Park. The air was crisp, the sun was just starting to rise, and the park was almost empty. I ran past the reservoir, past the Great Lawn, past all the places where I had walked when I was broke and desperate and dreaming of a different life. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs ached, and then I ran some more, because I could, because I was free, because I had proven to myself that I was capable of anything. When I got back to the hotel, there was a message waiting for me at the front desk. It was from Richard, asking to meet for breakfast. I crumpled it up and threw it in the trash. I had more important things to do. I had a company to run, employees who depended on me, clients who trusted me. I had a future to build, and it did not include looking backward. Marcus met me in the lobby at 9. Ready to go home? Ready, I said. We drove to Teterboro, back to the private jet that had started all of this. As we took off, I looked down at Manhattan, watching it shrink beneath us. Somewhere down there was Richard, Tiffany, and Skylar, probably still trying to process what had happened. But I was already moving forward. 6 months later, Monrovia Systems was valued at $200 million. We had expanded to 20 countries. We had 500 employees. Major corporations were fighting to be our clients, and Vance Corp filed for bankruptcy. I read about it in the Wall Street Journal one morning over coffee. The Phoenix Tower project had collapsed spectacularly. Cost overruns, design failures, and a final damning report from the city engineering department had killed it. Richard had tried to save the company by taking on more debt, but it only made things worse. I felt nothing, no satisfaction, no vindication, no pleasure, just emptiness where my father used to be. A week later he called me. I let it go to voicemail. I listened to the message once, heard the desperation in his voice, the apology he should have given 2 years ago, and I deleted it. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. Today, Monrovia Systems is worth over $1 billion. I've been featured on magazine covers, invited to speak at conferences around the world, asked to join boards and advisory councils. People call me a visionary, a disruptor, a success story. But I'm none of those things. I'm just a woman who refused to let other people define her worth. Who took the pain of rejection and transformed it into purpose. Who learned that sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all, but success so complete that the people who doubted you become irrelevant. I never spoke to Richard again. He reached out a few more times over the years, but I never responded. Last I heard, he was working as a consultant for a small firm in New Jersey. Skylar never finished another project. Tiffany left him for someone richer. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder what my life would have been like if Richard had believed in me. If he had supported me instead of betraying me. If he had been the father I needed instead of the one I got. But then I look at what I've built, at the company that started with nothing but rage and determination, and I realize that his betrayal was the greatest gift he ever gave me. It freed me. It forced me to believe in myself because no one else would. They told me I would never fly first class. They were right. I don't fly first class. I own the plane.